Good morning, class, and welcome to class number 4 of the Get Good Academy. Today we're going to talk about deck knowledge. What is it? Why is it important? Get a little bit into metagaming as well. So if you have not, go back, check out classes 1 through 3. They are helpful. They are not necessary prerequisites, but the stuff will eventually start building upon itself. The last couple of classes are going to definitely refer back to like you should already be doing classes 1 through, I don't know what numbers they're going to be. So go back and watch those. But let's go ahead and get into what deck knowledge is. So I'm just explaining what netdecking is. That's a term you're going to hear. Some of you already know it. And why it's actually a positive thing right now. Netdecking is something that a lot of people talk about as a negative, but I think it's actually one of the best things about the current meta. After talking to a lot of people from the past, it is something that you should be using to your advantage. And I don't know if everyone really is. And yeah, we'll discuss how to use it and why it is so valuable. So what is netdecking? Netdecking is taking a deck that someone else has played in a tournament. Sources, you can get it from Twitter, Limitless being the big one, either the play.limitlesstcg.com, where tournaments are currently being held, or once IRL tournaments come back, limitlesstcg.com, without the play, is the place to go. Facebook groups as well, Verbank, Hey Fonte, something like that. Most of the Pokemon communities move to Twitter, though, so you can find lists on there. You could also include YouTube channels, mine, Azul's, Mahone, Tablemon, Sableyes, Omnipoke. I definitely missed some in there, but Celios, there's just a ton of good ones you can also take from there. One of the reasons why people talk about netdecking as a negative thing is, oh, you're not building your own deck. You're not actually trying. You're not a real player. That is complete BS for two reasons. Number one, someone else built a really good deck. Like, if I'm going to go look at what the Limitless crew built, Tord, Robin, Nico, Pedro, etc., they are better deck builders than I am. Me taking their deck makes sense. The other reason is you can take these decks, you don't have to play them. You can make these minor changes to these decks. But knowing what other people are playing is ridiculously important. If you're the type of person who is like, I want to build my own deck, I want to do it my own way, that's cool. I'm not saying you have to take and play someone else's deck, but I'm saying you should be looking at all of these lists every single chance that you get. This is incredibly important knowledge. There are a lot of people who are going to just take these lists and play them, or they're going to play most of them. Knowing what is popular right now, what was popular in the last tournament, is incredibly valuable knowledge. Anyone who watches Azul GG on Twitch, you should, but anyone who does has heard him say this a lot. One of the most underrated skills in the game is just knowing what is in cards, knowing what cards are in decks, knowing the meta, things like that. So at all times, you should know about 56 cards in all of the meta decks. If I say Shadow Rider, what's in it? You should have a general idea. 4/4 Shadow Rider, 4 Fog Crystal, 4 Quick Ball, 2 Marshadows, 11-ish energy. Usually there's a 1/1 Alcremie line. You should be able to list all of this stuff off. Maybe not quickly, but fairly quickly. Most decks aren't going to vary too much. That is something that a lot of people say, oh, this is a negative in the game. Sure, you can think that. No matter what you think, people net decking, playing about the same lists, that's a bad thing. Your opinion doesn't matter if you're trying to be competitive, whether it's good or bad. What matters is that you use that knowledge to your advantage. When your opponent flips over a card, you probably know what's in their deck. That's good. You should be able to plan how the game is going to go. When you're testing, you should test against these popular lists. If there's a tournament, a week ago, a pretty big tournament, and you want to play test against a specific deck, take the top list, because there's a good chance you're going to play against people who play that exact list. That's not a bad thing either. If the list is good enough to win a tournament and you don't expect things to change, don't change it. But you shouldn't be caught into, oh, this has to be the exact 60. If you're playing against a Rapstrike Urshifu, you don't want to automatically, it has to be Alex Szymanski's 60 from the Players' Cup. No, but you should know Alex Szymanski's 60 from the Players' Cup, because if someone flips over a Rapstrike Urshifu, they're probably playing that list. I'll give you a hint. I would be playing that list. There's no reason to change it. He's very good, and that deck has won 2 pretty big tournaments. So when they flip over a card, you should know, you should have already played against the deck. You should have an idea of, okay, they play this many switch, they play this many boss, they play this many everything. And then you can start game planning around it. The last lesson, we talked about how to prize map, how to do things like that. You should automatically have a bit of an idea of what's in their deck to give you an idea of how you're going to prize map, how you're going to do. There's a variety of other things. How many switches do they play? Can you eventually boss stall something? How many energies do they play? Maybe they're going to run themselves out of energy because they had to have a research early, but they had to get rid of 3 of them. Think about techs as well. And this is something where you having the knowledge of what is in the popular decks can help decide what you're going to play, as well as what techs you might want to play. So start thinking about okay, I know about 56 cards in a Rapid Strike Urshifu list, typically. But what else? Do they play Mew? Do they not play Mew? That's something they could play. Tool Scrapper. Do I think they're going to play Tool Scrapper? Well, I know Alex played Tool Scrapper. Is that a card I think people would cut from the list? These are all questions you should be asking yourself constantly. Think about what techs could they fit in the deck? What techs would they fit in the deck? Now, if you're at a local tournament versus if you're at a regional or worlds or an international or something like that, it is a very different game. Or one of these online tournaments. Let's count that as a regional, no matter the size, just the fact that people are from everywhere. But if you're at a local tournament, you probably know everyone in the room after a couple of tournaments, and you have an idea of their habits. There's always going to be people who play the 60 that won the week before. If a Rapid Strike Urshifu list won a regional, you can see a couple people in the room, and you just know, all right, you're playing that list, you're playing that list, you're playing that list. That's incredibly valuable. Local metagaming is a little easier because all right, these people don't change their lists at all. That's not bad. I have played the exact same list to local tournaments for an entire quarter, 3 months, and I still am finishing in the top. So just because you know what people are going to play doesn't mean you're going to beat them, but it does help. That knowledge is incredibly important. Also, again, at locals, you're going to have people who are going to play some weird techs. That's another thing you need to keep out for. All right, you're the person who keeps flipping over these weird cards that I'm not expecting. Every time you play against them, you should be expecting some of those weird things. So at locals, use the knowledge of the week before, because some people in the room are going to play the exact list. Some people in the room are going to maybe switch a few cards, and some people in the room are just going to straight hard counter it. If Urshifu won, you're going to have a decent amount of people who are like, I have to play Shadow Rider. Sure, why not? Play Shadow Rider. That's fine. But use the knowledge of what decks are doing well, what are the lists. Know the list. You don't have to play it. You can play whatever it is you want. You can keep playing your Rapid Strike Malamar list, or you can keep playing whatever rogue deck you want to play. But you should still know what is in your opponent's deck. And that should also inform you a bit of hey, if my opponent's playing Rapid Strike Urshifu and Teleon, maybe it's not the time for Spiritomb. As much as I love it, maybe I'm going to bring something else, which is what I've done. I love Spiritomb. I don't play it anymore. Because Rapid Strike Urshifu at my locals is really popular. So it's just not the best call in the world. So pay attention to those trends. Assume things are going to change from one tournament to another. That's another one I didn't mention. So if Rapid Strike Urshifu is, let's say it's all 4 of a top 4. Sure, why not? Don't assume everyone's going to take the top 4 lists and the whole field's going to be Urshifu. People are going to see that and they're going to want to play Shadow Rider and things like that. So just assume things are going to change from one tournament to the next. Watch lists, notice what techs go in and out. Even if I'm going to play Pikarom this entire format. Cool, that's fine. Watch people's lists. Watch as everyone else's list changes. What are in the top 8s? How do they look different from one another? Maybe people are cutting certain cards, and that gives you an advantage of hey, if I can now put this tech into my list, we're good. Or maybe I can cut down from 4 of one card to 3 of another of a card. Kind of look at all of those things. Pay attention to lists, even if you play the same deck, and make changes based off of tech cards that you see coming in or out of all of these other top lists that people are going to take from, which is fine. Like I said, netdecking is not a bad thing. Taking someone else's list and playing the exact 60, I do that too. It is definitely something that a lot of people do, and there's no real reason not to. If a good list is good, then it's good. You don't have to worry about changing a ton from it. But you should be constantly watching lists. You should always know what are the main cards in a deck. So your homework, this is a bit of a longer one, but you can either check out the Play.Limitless TCG and study up on some of the common deck lists, go to one of the larger tournaments, anything with over 100-ish people or probably over 75 people is good. And just look at some of the common deck lists for major archetypes. This is one of those things that you're going to want to revisit this homework assignment once we hit whatever format it is you want to try hard next. If it's the current format, cool. If it's post-rotation, then, once Evolving Skies comes out, we get some post-rotation tournaments. You're going to want to do this. Check every single tournament you can and see their lists. And then at some point, try to build generic lists of the popular decks entirely from memory. Think, okay, my opponent flips over an Ice Rider. What does a post-rotation Ice Rider list look like? You should be able to write down or mentally think about, these are the cards I'm going to see in it. You should do this before all of your big tournaments too. You should really know, all right, these are the decks I'm expecting because they've done well. These are the cards I'm expecting in the deck. What you do with that information becomes a little more advanced. If you want more information on metagaming, listen to the podcast with Azul GG. He talks a lot about metagaming in it. So with Sander, the one with Azul and Sander, they both talk about metagaming quite a bit. The control episode. You should go back, check that Lake of Rage episode out. Yes, it's long, but it's really good. So you should definitely listen to that if you want more information about the deep dive into metagaming. But for now, this is how to use the knowledge. You should always, always, always have a good idea of what is doing well. When I talked to Robin Scholes for the podcast, he's like, Mello, I love the podcast. I listen to it. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, no way, right? But he just said, I watch a lot of Pokemon content. This is a world champion. This is one of the best players in the game. He is constantly taking in this TCG content for more knowledge. It's like, oh, the top players are meta manipulating. No, they're just paying attention to the meta and then countering it. That is totally fine. So you should be paying attention to the meta as well if you want to compete with the best players. So remember to like, comment, subscribe, all the other YouTube stuff, and I'll catch you all in the next class. Peace out.